Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking through some basic ecology definitions. Now it's a topic that you see in various forms in Key Stage 3 all the way through to Key Stage 5. This one's probably aimed at Key Stage 4, sort of GCSE level. There's many different ecological terms, but I'm just going to talk through some of the most common ones that get asked. And for this I'm going to draw, albeit probably quite badly, a bit of a scene, a sort of environmental scene here, just so we can put some of these into a context. So apologies that the picture isn't the best. So what I'm just drawing here is basically a layer of grass. We're going to just imagine that we're in a woodland perhaps. We've got some grass here. That's just going to be our starting point. First of all, we should define this word at the top, ecology. Now, ecology is defined as the study of interrelationships between organisms and their environment. That's how we define ecology, the study of interrelationships between organisms and their environment. So, in fact, let's take each definition one by one. I'm going to draw a few other little bits here. We're going to just put a tree in place here. Just maybe have a lake, just so we've got a few things to be working with. Put the tree in place there. We'll just put one or two creatures over here, so we'll have just some birds about the place. Might even have a cloud up here. Some rainfall coming down. So we're going to imagine it's a rainy day in this woodland. Now we're going to need a few creatures here. So let's have, I don't know, what could we have? In fact, I'm terrible at drawing different creatures. So for the sake of argument, I think what I'm going to do is just draw some very random animals all over the place, even though they don't probably exist in real life, just to make a point. What else should we have? Let's have a snake over here. I don't even know what I've really drawn with the other two. I just need a few, really. Again, it really doesn't matter. It's just to prove the point. No idea where I'm colouring it red. What the hell, we'll go with that. Now, what we're going to do, we'll take each definition and we'll relate it to this sort of, albeit quite weird scenario scene that we've set up. The non-living components of an environment, so such as the temperature or the rainfall that we have here, those non-living components are called the abiotic factors. So abiotic factors are the non-living components. The living components of an environment, such as competition or predation, so the predators that exist between the different species we have, they're called the biotic factors. So we have abiotic, which are the non-living components, and biotic, which are the living components. Now this whole region here, this whole life-supporting layer of land, and air, and water almost that surrounds the earth, we give a special name. This whole life-supporting layer we call the biosphere. Now, life zones or biomes, that's BIOMES, so individual biomes, are actually evident within the biosphere based on vegetation type that is predominant, such as a tundra. So you have very specific biomes within that sort of biosphere. But the life supporting layer of land, air and water we generally just call the biosphere. Now, all of the interacting biotic and abiotic features in a specific area we call an ecosystem. That's one key term we should put in the centre. So think about the ecosystem. It's actually defined as all the interacting biotic and abiotic features in a specific area, where there's self-contained functional units including energy flow and the cycling of elements within the system. That sounds a bit mouthy, but we'll work through all of those. So all the interacting biotic and abiotic features. So it's saying an interplay between those two. Self-contained functional units including energy flow basically just means a sort of system by which energy can flow from one thing to another, maybe from a producer to a consumer, to another consumer, so sort of through a food web, for example. And the cycling of elements can refer to, for example, like the carbon or nitrogen cycle, the recycling of elements within organic material, again through a food web, or just in a natural cycle in this environment. That's how we define an ecosystem, sometimes confused with ecology, which is the more generic term for looking at relationships between organisms and the environment they're in. So let's come to these very weird looking creatures that I've drawn in this woodland. Here, so this red thing in the bottom corner, we're going to call this, in fact, creature A. We'll call this one in the middle, this odd cat looking thing, B, and the snake, C. Even we'll call the bird D. If we just look at A, what we have is a group of interbreeding organisms of one species. Now that by definition is a population. So a population is made up of a group of interbreeding organisms of one species. And species, as I've said in another video, are a group of interbreeding organisms that interbreed with their own kind, producing offspring that are fertile. It's different to hybrid, because hybrids are sort of crosses between two that are sterile. They're crosses between two different species that produce sterile children, so we don't actually take them as species per se. But this is what a population is. It's a group of interbreeding organisms just of one species. If we were to take A and B and C and D, so A and B and C and D, so all of those different populations, then we get a community. A community is defined as populations of different species living and interacting in a particular place at the same time. So a particular place is this woodland, and populations of different species, well, we've got populations of A, we've got some of B, we've got some of C, we've got the birds flying around at D. So we have all these different species, and all of those populations of those different species interacting together make what's called a community. The place where a community of organisms lives is a habitat. So this woodland that I've drawn, this whole woodland is what's called a habitat. Now, if we were to zoom in, let's take this tree, for example. There may be a very particular branch on the tree where very small little insects live. Now, smaller units within a habitat, with even their own microclimate, they are called microhabitats. So that could be an example of a microhabitat. It's a smaller unit within a habitat, a larger habitat, with its own microclimate. Now there's really one more term that many people get confused, and it's niche. So we'll just put that in place. So one of the last terms we're going to look at is niche. Now the niche is defined as where an organism lives and what it does there. It's the role that an organism has in that environment. Now every different organism will play a part in this environment somehow, and we say that it has a niche, a specific sort of set of conditions that it can really thrive in, has a particular role to do in this environment. That's what a niche is. There are two things that sometimes at a higher level you see: fundamental niche and realised niche. They refer to sort of the range of optimal conditions that you can thrive in, the fundamental niche, and the realised niche are the conditions that you really have to, that you, as a result of competition perhaps, have to just get used to. A realised niche is a little bit more restricted in terms of sort of roles that you can have in an environment. Fundamental niche, the full range of conditions, and realised niche are those that you have to have, maybe as a result of being outcompeted. So there are two final definitions that I'd like to talk about with respect to this woodland ecosystem. And that's a natural and artificial ecosystem. A natural ecosystem is one that isn't managed at all or altered by human activity. So most likely this that I've drawn on this whole slide, this is probably a natural ecosystem. It's not managed or altered by human activity deliberately. Whereas an ecosystem that is managed or altered by human activity is an artificial ecosystem. Now examples can include woodlands, lakes, forestry plantations, and even fish farms. Within those ecosystems, one species usually is deliberately protected and any other species is removed that would directly affect the yield, particularly so in a fish farm. So you'd get a maximum yield of fish, and any other species that could interfere would be destroyed in effect. So woodlands, lakes, forestry plantations, fish farms, good examples to note in an exam of artificial ecosystems, ones that are deliberately managed or affected by human activity. So there we've just done a few of the basic ecology definitions that you'll need at Key Stage 4. Okay, hope all that helps.